There's a painful truth nobody wants to admit. Most people don't have a money problem. They have a personal development problem. And life is brutally honest about it. If someone hands you $1 million today, the money won't magically change your life. Not long term. Because your results will always return to the level of the person you currently are. If you don't grow into that money, you'll lose it. If you don't grow into that lifestyle, you'll sabotage it. If you don't grow into that confidence, you'll shrink back to what feels familiar. That's why some people get a lucky jump and then they fall right back down. Not because they're cursed, not because the system is unfair, but because their identity never expanded to hold the new level. So, if you want to be wealthy and happy for the rest of your life, the game is not chasing money. The game is becoming the kind of person money can't escape. Because success is not something you pursue. It's something you attract by the person you become. And happiness, real happiness, doesn't live inside what you get. It lives inside what you grow into. Tonight, we're going to build that person. Not with hype, not with wishful thinking, but with a simple system, 3 steps that can change your income, your confidence, your discipline, and your entire direction. And here's the best part. You don't need a perfect life to start. You don't need permission. You don't need luck. You just need to make one decision. Tomorrow, you will not be the same by default. You will change on purpose. Let's begin. Most people believe income is something you chase. They believe money sits somewhere outside of them, waiting to be captured through effort, luck, or timing. But income doesn't work that way. It never has. Income is not the cause. Income is the shadow. It is the shadow cast by who you are. Your income does not rise because you work harder. It rises because your internal ceiling rises. And that ceiling is your identity. This is why people who get lucky often end up right back where they started. A sudden promotion, a big client, a windfall, a business spike. For a moment, everything looks different. But if the person underneath hasn't changed, life slowly pulls the numbers back to familiar ground. Not because the world is unfair, but because the system is consistent. Money always seeks equilibrium with identity. If someone hands you $1 million today and you don't think like a millionaire, decide like a millionaire, tolerate pressure like a millionaire, and manage risk like a millionaire, the money has nowhere stable to live. It leaks out through choices that feel normal to the old version of you. Overspending doesn't feel reckless, it feels relieving. Bad partnerships don't feel dangerous, they feel exciting. Poor planning doesn't feel irresponsible, it feels free. The money disappears, not through one dramatic mistake, but through dozens of invisible decisions that align perfectly with who the person still is. This is why income rarely exceeds personal development for long. You can temporarily earn above your level. You cannot permanently stay there. Life corrects imbalance. That correction is not punishment. It is alignment. Your life is always trying to match your internal standards. Standards for how you handle discomfort. Standards for how long you can delay gratification. Standards for how you respond under stress. Standards for how you use time when no one is watching. These standards form your ceiling. And no strategy can break a ceiling that identity hasn't lifted. That's why two people can work the same job, earn the same paycheck, and live radically different futures. One invests surplus into growth, skills, and leverage. The other spends surplus on comfort, distraction, and validation. Same income, different identity trajectory. Income simply follows. This is also why happiness cannot be separated from wealth. Because happiness isn't found in what you get, it's found in what you become capable of holding without collapse. People chase money hoping it will make them feel secure. But security doesn't come from numbers. It comes from capacity. Capacity to solve problems. Capacity to adapt. Capacity to learn. Capacity to recover. When capacity grows, confidence grows quietly. When confidence grows, happiness stabilizes. That's why some people feel calm while still building wealth, and others feel anxious even after making it. Money didn't change them. It exposed the ceiling. The dangerous illusion is thinking the ceiling is external. People say, if only I earned more. If only I had better opportunities. If only someone gave me a chance. But opportunity doesn't raise ceilings. Identity does. The ceiling lifts when you change how you think under pressure. It lifts when you stop tolerating chaos in your schedule. It lifts when you stop needing motivation to do what you already decided matters. Identity is built through repetition, not inspiration. Every small promise you keep to yourself raises the floor. Every excuse you accept lowers it. This is why personal development is not a hobby, it is infrastructure. It's not about positive thinking. It's about structural reinforcement. Reinforcing how you decide, how you plan, how you follow through, how you respond when progress is slow. Most people wait for external results to motivate internal change. That order never works. Internal change must lead. External results follow later. And there is always a delay. That delay is where most people quit. They clean up habits, but see no immediate reward. They study, plan, adjust, but nothing happens yet. They mistake silence for failure. In reality, the ceiling is moving. The mind reorganizes before the bank account does. Discipline forms before opportunity appears. The person arrives before the reward follows. This is why the work feels lonely at first. Why it feels invisible. Why it feels like you're doing more without seeing more. That phase is not wasted effort. It's construction. You don't notice a ceiling lifting until your head stops hitting it. And one day, almost without drama, you realize you're handling more without stress. Decisions feel clearer. Pressure feels quieter. Time feels more intentional. Money follows that state naturally. Not because you chased it, but because you became someone it could stay with. This chapter isn't asking you to judge where you are. It's asking you to recognize the mechanism. If income is low, the question isn't, how do I make more? The deeper question is, what part of my identity has not been upgraded yet? Not skills alone, not knowledge alone, but standards. Standards for effort, standards for focus, standards for integrity, standards for patience. Raise those, and the ceiling moves. Ignore them, and no tactic will save you. This is the quiet truth behind wealth and happiness. They are not prizes you win. They are byproducts of alignment. Alignment between who you are becoming and what you're trying to hold. When identity leads, life follows. And once you understand this, you stop chasing outcomes and start building the person who makes them inevitable. Most people say they have a money problem. They don't. What they have is a value problem disguised as a financial one. Lack of money is rarely the root issue. It is the symptom. Money only exposes what is missing underneath missing ideas, missing skills, missing systems, missing leverage, missing patience. That distinction changes everything. Because if money itself were the problem, then a paycheck increase would solve it. A loan would solve it. A lucky break would solve it. But we already know how that story ends. More money enters. Old patterns remain. The gap closes again. That's not bad luck. That's design. Money flows toward value creation. It avoids environments where it cannot multiply. When people say, "I don't have enough money," what they usually mean is, "I don't yet produce enough value that the market consistently rewards." And value is not effort. Value is not time spent. Value is not intention. Value is usefulness, leverage, and reliability under pressure. This is why two people can work equally hard and earn wildly different outcomes. One solves low-impact problems. The other solves expensive ones. One trades time. The other builds systems. One reacts. The other anticipates. Money follows the second, not because they deserve it more, but because their output compounds. This is why chasing money directly creates frustration. You're chasing the effect, not the cause. The cause is usefulness at scale. Once you understand this, desperation fades. You stop asking, "How do I make more?" and start asking, "What problem do I solve, and how well?" That shift alone moves you out of scarcity. Scarcity thinking focuses on getting. Value thinking focuses on becoming useful. Scarcity asks, "How do I extract more from this situation?" Value asks, "How do I improve what I bring into this situation?" Markets reward the second every time. This is also where happiness enters the equation. People who chase money often feel anxious even when earning more, because their identity is still tied to survival. People who focus on value feel calmer even while building, because they trust their capacity. Capacity creates peace. When you know you can learn, adapt, and contribute, money stops feeling like a threat. It becomes feedback. Feedback you can respond to. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. If your income hasn't changed in years, it's not because the world is holding you back. It's because your value profile hasn't changed enough. Same skills, same thinking, same habits, same inputs. Life doesn't punish stagnation, it simply mirrors it. This is why studying wealth matters, not wishing for it. Wealthy people are not lucky thinkers. They are structural thinkers. They ask, "How does this work? Why does this produce results? Where does leverage hide? What compounds over time?" Poor thinking stays surface level. It looks for shortcuts, hacks, and secrets. Wealth thinking looks for understanding. Understanding creates repeatability. Repeatability creates stability. Stability creates happiness. This is why money problems often dissolve when people improve their thinking. Even before income rises, they plan better. They waste less energy. They choose environments more carefully. They stop leaking value through impulse. Nothing mystical happens. Alignment happens, and alignment feels like relief. This chapter is not asking you to ignore money. It's asking you to stop worshipping it. Money is a tool, not a target. The target is usefulness. The target is competence. The target is becoming someone whose presence improves outcomes. Once you aim there, money follows quietly. And when money follows value instead of ego, happiness follows too, because you're no longer trying to prove anything. You're simply building. That's the real solution. Not more money first. More you first. Everything else catches up. Most people treat learning like a side activity. Something you do when you have time. Something optional. Something you stop once school ends. That mindset quietly limits an entire life. Because the truth is simple and uncomfortable, your future does depend on what and how you study. Not formal education. Not degrees. Not certificates. But deliberate, focused, self-directed study. If you don't study success, you live by accident. If you don't study wealth, you inherit beliefs from people who never built it. If you don't study happiness, you repeat emotional patterns you didn't choose. Life does not require permission to shape you. If you don't choose the curriculum, circumstances will. Most people are not failing because they are lazy. They are failing because they are unstudied. They hope instead of understanding. They guess instead of learning. They react instead of preparing. Hope is not a strategy. Study is. Studying is how you replace randomness with intention. And studying does not mean collecting information. Information alone changes nothing. People read books, watch videos, listen to podcasts, and remain exactly the same because nothing is integrated. True study changes how you see. It changes what you notice, what you ignore, what you question, what you no longer tolerate. That's why studying the right things feels uncomfortable at first. It challenges assumptions. It breaks emotional attachments to old stories. That discomfort is growth. If you want to be successful, study success, not motivation. Success has structure, patterns, rules. If you want to be wealthy, study wealth, not fantasies. Wealth has systems, time horizons, trade-offs. If you want to be happy, study happiness, not pleasure. Happiness has discipline, boundaries, self-respect. These are three different libraries. Most people mix them up. They try to learn wealth from entertainment. They try to learn happiness from consumption. They try to learn success from hype. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. Study requires intention. You don't read randomly. You read with questions. You don't listen passively. You listen to extract principles. You don't admire outcomes. You dissect processes. That's the difference between a consumer and a student. Consumers collect content. Students collect understanding. And understanding compounds. One clear idea can save you 5 years of trial and error. One principle applied consistently can outperform 10 years of effort without direction. That's why self-education outperforms formal education for life outcomes. Formal education gives you tools. Self-education teaches you when, why, and how to use them. And here's the part most people resist. Studying requires humility. You must admit, I don't know how this works yet. Pride blocks learning faster than ignorance ever could. People stay stuck not because answers aren't available, but because they don't like what those answers demand of them. Studying wealth reveals delayed gratification. Studying success reveals discipline. Studying happiness reveals responsibility. Those truths don't sell well, but they work. This is why 30 minutes a day is enough if it's real study. 30 minutes of focused reading. 30 minutes of thinking, not scrolling. 30 minutes of extracting one idea and asking, how does this apply to my life? Not entertainment. Not escape. Training. Your mind is the primary asset you will ever own. And like any asset, it depreciates without maintenance. If you don't feed it clarity, it feeds on noise. If you don't guide it, it copies whatever environment surrounds it. Study is how you take control of that process. And, over time, something subtle happens. Your questions get sharper. Your reactions slow down. Your decisions improve quietly. You stop needing constant motivation because understanding replaces emotion. That's when wealth and happiness stop feeling mysterious. They stop being goals. They become consequences. Consequences of learning the right things deeply over time. Study like your future depends on it. Because whether you choose it or not, it does. Most people think writing things down is about memory. They are wrong. Writing is not storage. Writing is installation. A journal is not a place to dump thoughts. It is a place where identity is programmed. This is why so many people learn but never change. They read, they listen, they nod, and then life stays the same. Because nothing was repeated. Nothing was installed deeply enough to survive emotion, pressure, or distraction. Repetition is not boring. Repetition is how the nervous system accepts something as true. The brain does not respond to intensity. It responds to consistency. One powerful idea heard once feels inspiring. The same idea revisited daily becomes structural. That's the difference between motivation and transformation. A journal turns learning into rhythm. Without a journal, ideas pass through you. With a journal, ideas settle. Most people misuse their mind as a filing cabinet. They try to remember everything. Memory is unreliable. Emotion rewrites it constantly. Writing removes that instability. When you write an idea down, you take it out of emotion and put it into form. Form can be revisited. Emotion cannot. But here's the key distinction that changes everything. A journal is not for recording what happened. It is for reinforcing what matters. You don't write everything. You write what you want to become. This is why repetition matters more than volume. 10 pages written once does less than 1 page revisited daily. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates belief. Belief creates behavior. That's the chain. This is how identity shifts quietly, without force. You don't need affirmations shouted into a mirror. You need calm, repeated exposure to aligned ideas. When you write something repeatedly, the brain stops questioning it. It starts organizing behavior around it. That's reprogramming. And it works, whether you believe in it or not. Your current identity was built this same way through repeated exposure to ideas, stories, reactions, and environments you did not consciously choose. A journal allows you to choose now. The mistake people make is turning journaling into a productivity task. Long entries, complex systems, perfection. That kills it. The journal should be simple enough that you can't fail. One page, same structure, same ideas revisited. Repetition does the work. Think of the journal as a slow drip. You don't flood the system. You condition it. Each day you revisit. What am I building? How do I want to think under pressure? What behaviors does my future self consider normal? You don't write new answers every day. You write the same answers until they feel boring. Boredom is a sign the idea is installing. When something no longer excites you but still guides you, it has moved from emotion into identity. That's the goal. This is why journaling works best when it feels almost too simple. No performance, no audience, no drama, just repetition. People underestimate how much repetition is required to override old conditioning. You are not fighting logic. You are fighting habitual neural pathways built over years. They don't collapse because of insight. They dissolve because of replacement. Every time you write an aligned idea, you weaken the old one slightly. Nothing dramatic happens, until suddenly, your reactions change. You pause instead of panic. You plan instead of impulsively acting. You choose discomfort instead of distraction. You don't feel motivated. You feel stable. That stability is power. This is also why journaling pairs perfectly with night listening. At night, the conscious mind softens. Resistance lowers. Repeated ideas sink deeper. You are not trying to convince yourself of anything. You are allowing alignment to form. And alignment is quiet. People think change should feel intense. Real change feels calm. When journaling works, you don't feel hyped. You feel grounded. And over time, results appear without urgency. Your lifestyle shifts first. Your personality follows. Your income reflects it later. The journal doesn't create money. It creates the person money stays with. That's the difference. This chapter is not asking you to write more. It's asking you to write intentionally. Stop writing to remember. Write to reinforce. Stop chasing novelty. Return to fundamentals. The ideas that change your life are not hidden. They are ignored because they require repetition. If you want wealth and happiness to become normal instead of accidental, you need a system that works even when you're tired, emotional, or distracted. That system is repetition, and the journal is its simplest form. Not exciting, not flashy, but real. And real is what lasts. Most people read to feel informed. Very few read to be transformed. That difference decides almost everything. Reading without purpose is entertainment, wearing the mask of growth. It feels productive, but it leaves behavior unchanged. You close the book inspired and live the same day again. Purposeful reading is different. It is slow, it is selective, and it is uncomfortable. Because it asks one quiet question most people avoid. What will this require me to change? If reading does not pressure your habits, it will never upgrade your life. That is why some people read hundreds of books and stay stuck, while others read a handful and completely alter their trajectory. It is not about volume. It is about application pressure. Purposeful reading follows a simple rule. You are not allowed to move on until something moves in you. This is where the famous 30 minutes a day becomes powerful, not because it is long, but because it is contained. 30 minutes forces focus. It prevents binge reading. It creates a boundary, and boundaries create depth. Within those 30 minutes, you are not reading randomly. You are reading with intent. You read with a pen nearby. Not to underline everything that's another trap, but to capture what challenges your current operating system. One idea, one principle, one uncomfortable truth. That's enough. The goal is not to finish books. The goal is to finish ideas. An idea is finished only when it changes how you act. This is why one book, read properly, can buy you back 5 years of life. Because it saves you from blind trial and error. It prevents mistakes you haven't earned yet. It hands you condensed experience. But only if you treat reading as a discipline, not a hobby. Discipline means you read even when you don't feel like it. Discipline means you stop scrolling and open a book. Discipline means you revisit difficult chapters instead of chasing novelty. Most people abandon books at the exact moment they become useful, when the ideas stop flattering them and start confronting them. That's where growth lives. Purposeful reading also requires selection. You don't read everything. You read strategically. You choose books aligned with what you are building now. If you are building wealth, you study leverage, systems, decision-making, long-term thinking. If you are building happiness, you study emotional regulation, boundaries, meaning, self-respect. If you are building leadership, you study communication, psychology, responsibility. You don't mix all categories at once. You go deep in one direction. Depth compounds faster than breadth. This is another mistake people make. They confuse exposure with mastery. Reading 10 different books on 10 different topics feels productive. It creates mental noise. Reading one book slowly, extracting principles, applying them daily, that creates identity change. And identity change is the real objective. Purposeful reading is not about becoming smarter. It's about becoming clearer. Clearer about how things work. Clearer about why things fail. Clearer about what matters and what doesn't. Clarity reduces anxiety. Most stress comes from not understanding what you are dealing with. When you don't understand money, it feels threatening. When you don't understand relationships, they feel chaotic. When you don't understand yourself, life feels overwhelming. Reading with purpose reduces that fog. And here is a critical warning most people ignore. Do not read for motivation. Motivation is emotional sugar. It spikes you, then crashes you. Read for structure. Structure holds you steady when motivation disappears. and it always does. That is why the best books don't make you feel excited. They make you feel sober. They organize your thinking. They reduce inner noise. They replace confusion with models. Those are the books that quietly change lives. Purposeful reading also demands restraint. You do not jump from book to book chasing the next insight. You stay with one until it has fully expressed itself in your behavior. If a book introduces a principle like delayed gratification, you don't just understand it, you practice it. You notice where you fail. You adjust. That process takes time. And that's why reading with purpose feels slower. But slower is faster in the long run. People who rush consume more information and apply less. People who slow down apply more and need less information. This is why self-education outperforms formal education for life outcomes. Formal education tests memory. Self-education tests character. No one grades you. No one checks your work. You either apply or you don't. And life keeps score quietly. Purposeful reading also changes how you listen to others. You stop being impressed by confidence. You start looking for coherence. You stop chasing charisma. You start respecting consistency. Books train your discernment. They sharpen your ability to separate signal from noise. That skill alone can save you years. Because once you can tell who understands something deeply versus who is merely repeating phrases, you stop following the wrong people. And following the wrong people is one of the fastest ways to waste a life. This chapter is not telling you to read more. It is telling you to read better. Read less. Apply more. Read slower. Think deeper. Read until something changes in how you live. That is how reading becomes a lever instead of a distraction. 30 minutes a day, done this way, is not small. It is surgical. Over months, it rewires how you decide. Over years, it reshapes your future. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. That is the power of reading with purpose. And that is why the right book, at the right time, read the right way, can quietly change everything. Most people try to invent their way out of struggle. That instinct feels noble, but it is inefficient. The fastest way to change your life is not originality. It is pattern recognition. Everything you want already exists in someone else's behavior. Someone is already earning what you want to earn. Someone is already living the lifestyle you want to live. Someone is already calm under pressures that overwhelm you. That means the blueprint exists. The question is not if it exists. The question is whether you are willing to listen, observe, and borrow it. Listening is a skill, and most people never develop it. They wait for their turn to speak. They listen to reply, not to understand. They filter everything through ego. True listening requires silence inside. When you listen properly, you are not looking for validation. You are looking for patterns. Patterns in how successful people think. Patterns in how they respond to problems. Patterns in what they ignore. This is why proximity matters. You cannot learn deeply from a distance. Reading gives you principles. Listening gives you nuance. You hear tone. You hear pauses. You hear certainty where others hesitate. And those subtleties matter more than words. This is why getting around people who are doing better than you is uncomfortable. It exposes gaps. But discomfort is information. When someone speaks calmly about decisions that feel terrifying to you, they are showing you where your internal limits live. That's not discouraging. That's diagnostic. Most people avoid successful people because it triggers insecurity. They tell themselves stories. They're different. They got lucky. They had advantages. Those stories protect ego, but they steal growth. The right response is curiosity. Curiosity dissolves envy. Curiosity turns intimidation into education. When you listen with curiosity, you stop comparing outcomes and start studying processes. You notice what questions successful people ask. You notice how they frame risk. You notice how little emotion they attach to setbacks. They don't dramatize. They adjust. That alone separates outcomes. But listening alone is not enough. Observation completes the picture. Success leaves clues, not slogans. People love quotes. But quotes rarely tell you how someone lives. Observation does. Watch how successful people structure their day. Watch how they manage energy. Watch how they treat small commitments. Do they arrive early? Do they follow through? Do they protect their focus? Those behaviors reveal standards, and standards create results. People often copy surface-level traits and miss the engine. They copy the funny walk instead of the discipline behind it. They copy confidence without competence. They copy aesthetics without systems. That never works. Observation is about watching consistency, not charisma. What does someone do repeatedly? Even when no one is watching, that's the pattern worth borrowing. And yes, borrowing matters. There is nothing weak about copying what works. Every system in the world exists because someone borrowed and refined a pattern. The problem is not copying. The problem is copying without understanding. Borrow principles, not personalities. You don't need someone else's style. You need their structure, how they decide, how they plan, how they recover. Those are transferable. This is why mentorship, formal or informal, accelerates growth. One conversation with someone experienced can collapse years of confusion, not because they give you answers, but because they help you ask better questions. Better questions change direction. This is also why investing time, energy, and even money to be around the right people is never a waste. People hesitate to buy someone dinner. They hesitate to ask thoughtful questions. They hesitate to position themselves as learners. That hesitation is expensive. The cost of pride is always higher than the cost of humility. 2 hours of conversation with someone who has already solved your problem can save you years of trial and error. That is leverage. Listening and observing also work in reverse. You learn from failure too. Watch what struggling people do consistently. Watch how they speak about responsibility. Watch how they blame systems instead of adjusting strategy. Take notes, but don't imitate. Negative examples are warnings. They show you paths that look normal but lead nowhere. Listening to complaints teaches you what not to tolerate. Observing stagnation teaches you what habits to avoid. Wisdom comes from contrast. You don't learn only from success. You learn from seeing where patterns break. The key is neutrality. Don't judge. Don't mock. Just observe. Observation sharpens discernment. And discernment is a quiet superpower. Once you develop it, you stop being easily influenced. You stop chasing hype. You stop mistaking confidence for competence. You become selective. That selectivity protects happiness. Many people become wealthy and miserable because they copied the wrong patterns. They copied speed instead of balance. They copied ambition instead of meaning. Listening and observing deeply helps you choose wisely. You don't just ask, "Does this work?" You ask, "Does this work without destroying the person using it?" That question matters. True success is sustainable. And sustainable success always leaves clues in how someone lives, not just what they earn. This chapter is about humility with intention. You are not here to shrink. You are here to learn faster. Listen more than you speak. Observe more than you judge. Borrow patterns that align with the life you actually want. When you do this consistently, your growth accelerates quietly. No announcements, no hype, just alignment. And alignment always pays in wealth, in happiness, and in peace. Most people believe success is mysterious. They assume it comes from talent, luck, timing, or privilege. That belief is comforting because if success is random, failure is not your responsibility. But it's also false. Success is patterned, and patterns can be observed. This chapter is about a discipline almost no one practices seriously: intentional observation. Not motivation, not affirmations, not theory. Watching how successful people actually live. Because success leaves clues quietly, consistently, and in places most people never look. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people observe results, not process. They notice the car, the house, the lifestyle. They ignore the decisions, habits, and trade-offs that created them. That is why imitation fails. They copy surface behavior instead of structural behavior. They copy personality instead of process. And personality is irrelevant. Two people can act completely different on the surface and still follow the same internal system. What matters is not who they are. It's how they think, decide, and use time. This chapter teaches you how to see that. Observation is not passive. It is an active skill. You are not watching to admire. You are watching to decode. Every successful person operates with invisible rules. Rules about time. Rules about energy. Rules about attention. Rules about decision-making. Your job is to find those rules. Start with time. Watch how successful people treat time, not what they say, but what they protect. They don't just work hard. They work deliberately. They have boundaries. They decide in advance what deserves focus and what does not. Notice how rarely they rush. Notice how they say no without guilt. Notice how they don't explain themselves excessively. Time is their most guarded asset. Next, observe decision-making. Successful people do not make more decisions, they make fewer. They remove trivial choices. They standardize routines. They avoid emotional decisions whenever possible. They choose principles over impulses. This is why their lives look calm, even under pressure. Chaos comes from constant decision-making. Order comes from systems. Now observe how they respond to problems. Unsuccessful people personalize problems. Successful people neutralize them. They don't ask. Why is this happening to me, they ask. What does this require? There is no drama in their analysis. Emotion is acknowledged, then removed. This is a critical distinction. Emotion clouds observation. Calm reveals patterns. Watch how they speak, not the words, the structure. They are precise. They don't over-explain. They don't talk to impress. They talk to clarify. And they listen far more than they speak. Listening is how they collect information. Talking is how they test conclusions. This is why copying someone's tone, confidence, or charisma is useless. Those are outputs. You want the input system. Watch how they learn. They don't consume information for entertainment. They consume it for application. They read slowly. They revisit ideas. They take notes not to store information, but to shape thinking. They ask different questions. Not what is interesting, but what changes my behavior. This is why one book can change someone's life for 5 years, while another person reads 50 books and stays the same. The difference is observation with intent. Now, here is the most overlooked area: how they handle boredom. Success is built in boring moments. Repetition, maintenance, consistency. Watch how successful people don't need novelty to stay engaged. They respect boring systems because boring systems compound. Unsuccessful people chase stimulation. Successful people build stability. This is not exciting. It is effective. Observation also requires humility. If you believe you already know, you stop seeing. Pride blinds pattern recognition. This is why the best observers act like beginners. They assume they are missing something. They ask simple questions. They stay curious. They watch without judgment. They understand this rule: every result is evidence of a system. Wealth is evidence. Health is evidence. Relationships are evidence. Stress levels are evidence. Nothing is accidental. And if something is repeatable, it is learnable. One critical warning: do not observe outcomes and jump to conclusions. A person making $10,000 a month might look disciplined, but their system could be fragile. Look for sustainability. Look for depth, not flash. Look at 5 years, not 5 months. That is why the principle matters. Copy the process, not the personality. You do not need their humor. You do not need their confidence. You do not need their style. You need their structure. Structure is transferable. Personality is not. This chapter is not telling you to become someone else. It is telling you to borrow intelligence. Borrow patterns. Borrow filters. Borrow rules. Observation saves time. Why guess when someone already mapped the terrain? Why repeat mistakes when they've already documented the cost? This is how you accelerate without shortcuts. Finally, understand this. Observation only works if paired with action. Watching without implementing creates frustration. You must test what you see. Adopt one rule, one habit, one boundary. Then observe yourself. Your life becomes the experiment. And slowly, something changes. You stop chasing success. You start building alignment. Because when your behavior matches successful systems, Results follow naturally, not magically, naturally. Success does not hide. It leaves clues everywhere. Most people just never learned how to look. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is intensity. They think it's forcing yourself to do hard things through raw willpower. They think discipline looks dramatic early mornings, extreme routines, visible suffering. That belief is why most people fail at it. Real discipline is quiet. It is small, and it begins with promises so minor they seem almost meaningless. This chapter is about rebuilding discipline from the only place it actually works, small promises kept daily. Not motivation, not pressure, not punishment. Reliability. Because discipline is not about how much you can push yourself. It is about how much your nervous system trusts you. And trust is built one kept promise at a time. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't lack discipline. They lack self-trust. They have broken so many small promises to themselves that their mind no longer believes their intentions. They say, "I'll start tomorrow." Their brain hears. This is not real. They say, "This time I'm serious." Their brain remembers the last 10 times. So when action is required, resistance appears. Not because they're lazy, but because the system has learned not to cooperate. Discipline does not begin with big goals. It begins with credibility. And credibility is built through small promises that are impossible to miss. That is why the principle of this chapter matters. Small promises first. Not impressive promises, not ambitious promises, but promises you can keep even on your worst day. 5 minutes of reading, 10 push-ups, writing 1 sentence, showing up, not finishing. These actions seem insignificant, and that is exactly why they work. Because when you keep them, something changes internally. Your brain updates its model of you. You said you would do this, and you did. That is the beginning of discipline. Discipline is not forcing action. It is removing internal resistance. Resistance comes from mistrust. Mistrust comes from inconsistency. Consistency comes from promises you actually keep. This is why people who chase motivation stay stuck. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is neurological. Motivation fluctuates. Discipline stabilizes. And the only thing that stabilizes behavior long-term is predictability. Your nervous system wants safety. Kept promises create safety. Broken promises create stress. This is why people feel tired before they even start. Their system is already exhausted from fighting itself. Now understand this clearly. Self-motivation is the only motivation that exists. External motivation is temporary compliance. It fades the moment pressure disappears. If you rely on others to push you, you will always stop when they're gone. Discipline means you act even when no one is watching, especially then. That is why this chapter focuses on promises made in private. Because what you do when no one sees is what trains your identity. Every kept promise tells your subconscious, "I am the kind of person who follows through." Every broken promise tells it the opposite. Identity is not built through thinking. It is built through evidence. And small promises generate evidence quickly. Here is another mistake people make. They start with goals that require discipline they do not yet possess. That is like trying to lift a weight your muscles haven't trained for. Failure is predictable and demoralizing. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So you build the system first. You train the discipline muscle the same way you train any muscle gradually. Small load, perfect form, high consistency. This is why learning without doing is dangerous. Knowledge without action becomes weight. It increases pressure without increasing capacity. That pressure turns into guilt. Guilt turns into avoidance. Avoidance turns into paralysis. This is why people who consume endless content but don't act feel heavier, not lighter. They are carrying unfinished intentions. Discipline releases that weight, not by doing more, but by doing what you said you would do, even if it's small, especially if it's small. There is power in finishing tiny things. Completion restores momentum. Completion signals safety. Completion tells your nervous system, we are in control. That control is addictive in a healthy way. Once you experience the calm that comes from self-trust, you stop needing hype. You don't need speeches. You don't need urgency. You don't need fear. You have rhythm. And rhythm beats intensity every time. This is also why discipline creates freedom, not restriction. Undisciplined lives feel chaotic. Disciplined lives feel spacious. When you trust yourself, your mind relaxes. You stop negotiating with yourself all day. You stop arguing internally. Energy returns. Clarity returns. Because discipline removes decision fatigue. If it's decided, it's done. No drama. No debate. This chapter is not asking you to become strict. It is asking you to become reliable. Reliable to yourself. And reliability is built through small, repeatable acts. Here is the key test of a good promise. You should feel slightly bored, keeping it not stressed. If it feels heavy, it's too big. If it feels exciting, it's probably emotional. The right size promise feels almost too easy. That's intentional. Because the goal is not the action. The goal is the identity shift. Once identity shifts, behavior follows automatically. Eventually, small promises stack. 5 minutes becomes 15. 1 page becomes a chapter. 10 push-ups become a routine. But by then, discipline is no longer something you force. It's something you are. And this is the most important line in the chapter. You don't rise by intensity. You rise by integrity. Integrity is alignment between word and action. And alignment creates power. This is how people rebuild themselves quietly. No announcement. No countdown. No performance. Just small promises kept in silence. Over time, the system stabilizes. The mind stops resisting, and discipline becomes natural. Not because life got easier, but because you became someone your system can trust. That is real discipline, and it always starts small. There is a moment in every person's journey where impatience appears. You've learned. You've worked. You've stayed consistent longer than most. And then a quiet temptation enters your mind. There must be a faster way. This is where many people lose everything they were building. Not because they stopped trying, but because they tried to beat the system. They start looking for shortcuts. for loopholes, for tricks that bypass the boring parts. And the system always punishes that behavior slowly, then all at once. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Every system you try to beat will eventually beat you back. Markets, health, relationships, skills, money, reputation. They all operate under laws, not opinions. You can ignore those laws for a while, but you cannot escape their consequences. People who attempt to beat the system often look clever at first. They skip steps. They take risks others won't. They appear to move faster. But what they're actually doing is trading depth for speed. And depth is what makes progress stable. This chapter is about understanding why playing within the system patiently, deeply, and correctly creates results that last, and why every shortcut secretly creates fragility. Most people think the system is unfair. They say things like, the system is rigged, the game is stacked, you have to cheat to win. That belief is dangerous because it justifies poor decisions. When you believe the system is unfair, you feel entitled to cut corners. And cutting corners always creates cracks. Those cracks don't show immediately. They show when pressure arrives. Let's talk about money. People who try to beat the financial system chase quick wins. Speculation, gambling disguised as investing, leverage without understanding risk. Sometimes it works briefly, but without skill, discipline, and depth, money always returns to those who understand the system better. This is why windfalls disappear. This is why lottery winners go broke. This is why sudden success often collapses. The system rebalances, not out of cruelty, out of law. Money follows value. If value doesn't grow, money cannot stay. Trying to beat the system is trying to bypass value creation, and value cannot be skipped. The same is true in skills. People want credentials without competence, titles without mastery. They copy surface behavior instead of building foundation. They want results without repetition. That works until it doesn't. Because when real problems appear, surface-level skill collapses. Depth survives. This is why the slow path is actually the fast one over time. The system rewards those who go deep. The system punishes those who rush. Another reason people try to beat the system is ego. They don't want to feel average. They don't want to be beginners. They want to appear ahead. So they fake progress. They inflate results. They exaggerate success. They hide weaknesses. That creates internal pressure. Because now you're not just building, you're performing. Performance drains energy. Progress restores it. The system doesn't care how you look. It only responds to what you are. This chapter is not about obeying blindly. It's about understanding how systems actually work and aligning with them. Systems are not enemies. They are filters. They filter out inconsistency. They filter out entitlement. They filter out impatience. What passes through is what's solid. Think of the system like gravity. You don't fight gravity. You build structures that respect it. If you build a house that ignores gravity, it collapses. If you build with gravity in mind, it stands for generations. The same principle applies to life. There are no hacks around fundamentals. You cannot hack trust. You cannot hack health. You cannot hack skill. You cannot hack wisdom. You can only earn them. And earning takes time. People who win long-term stop asking, "How do I beat this?" They start asking, "How does this actually work?" That shift changes everything. When you understand the system, patience becomes easier. You stop comparing yourself to outliers. You stop chasing anomalies. You focus on building leverage the correct way. This is what playing the long game really means. Not waiting passively, but going deep instead of wide. Doing fewer things correctly. Staying boring longer than others can tolerate. And here's the paradox. The system rewards those who stop trying to beat it. Because they build skills that compound. They build reputations that protect them. They build resilience that carries them through downturns. When setbacks come, and they always do, the system tests structure. Those who took shortcuts collapse. Those who built properly adjust and continue. This chapter is also about humility. Accepting that you don't know everything. Accepting that growth takes time. Accepting that mastery is earned, not hacked. Humility keeps you learning. Arrogance makes you reckless. And recklessness is expensive. There is also peace in playing the system correctly. You stop feeling anxious. You stop feeling rushed. You stop feeling like you're behind. Because you understand something most people don't. Consistency aligned with structure always wins. Not today. Not tomorrow. But inevitably. That word matters. Inevitable outcomes are quiet. They don't need hype. They don't need validation. They arrive because the math works. This is why people who build slowly often surpass those who sprint early. The sprinters burn out. The builders accumulate. So this chapter leaves you with a simple instruction. Stop looking for ways around the work. Look for ways into it more deeply. Study fundamentals. Respect process. Choose depth over speed. The system is not blocking you. It is testing you. And when you stop trying to beat it, you realize something powerful. The system was never your enemy. It was your teacher. There is a moment in every life that looks ordinary from the outside. No announcement. No dramatic turning point. No applause. But internally, something shifts. This chapter is about that moment. Not the fantasy version of change, the overnight transformation. The viral success. The sudden breakthrough. But the real one. The moment you flip what I call the tomorrow switch. Most people live as if tomorrow is a continuation of yesterday. They assume the future is simply a stretched version of the past. Same habits, same reactions, same patterns, different date. That assumption is what traps people for years. Because if tomorrow is just yesterday repeated, nothing changes. The tomorrow switch is the decision that breaks that loop. It is not a decision to be different in theory. It is a decision to do one thing differently, consistently, starting tomorrow and never renegotiate it again. This is where everything you've learned in the previous chapters converges. Identity, ideas, study, repetition, reading, listening, observation, discipline, respecting the system. None of those matter if tomorrow looks the same. The tomorrow switch is where knowledge turns into direction. Most people wait for confidence before they change. That is backwards. Confidence comes after consistency, not before it. The tomorrow switch does not require confidence. It requires commitment. And commitment is not emotional. It is structural. When you flip the switch, you stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" You start asking, "What did I decide?" That single shift removes enormous friction. This is why people stay stuck for years even after consuming powerful ideas. They never lock anything in. They keep everything negotiable. Negotiation creates delay. Delay creates doubt. Doubt creates paralysis. The tomorrow switch ends negotiation. It says, "This is who I am now. This is what happens next." Not loudly, not publicly, quietly. The switch is personal. It's not something you announce on social media. It's not something you explain to friends. In fact, the more silent it is, the stronger it becomes. Because silence removes pressure to perform. You are no longer acting for approval. You are acting from alignment. Here is the most important truth of this chapter. Your future does not change when you want it to. It changes when your daily defaults change. Defaults decide outcomes. What you do when you're tired. What you do when no one is watching. What you do when motivation is gone. The tomorrow switch changes defaults. It chooses one behavior that becomes automatic. Not 10, not 5, 1. One reading habit, one writing habit, one thinking habit, one financial habit, one discipline habit. Small enough to be sustainable, firm enough to be non-negotiable. People fail here because they try to flip too many switches at once. They overload the system. They collapse. The tomorrow switch works because it respects human psychology. One change at a time, repeated daily, long enough to rewire identity. Identity is not what you say you are. Identity is what you repeatedly do without thinking. Once something becomes default, it stops costing energy. That is when momentum appears. This is also where wealth and happiness intersect. Wealth is not just money. Happiness is not just feeling good. Both are byproducts of alignment over time. Alignment between who you say you want to be and what you actually do each day. When alignment is broken, stress appears. When alignment is restored, peace appears. The tomorrow switch restores alignment. It tells your nervous system we are no longer confused. Confusion is exhausting. Clarity is calming. This is why disciplined people often look relaxed. Not because life is easy, but because they are not fighting themselves. They know what happens tomorrow. They've already decided. The tomorrow switch also eliminates regret. Regret does not come from failure. It comes from inaction, from knowing what to do and not doing it. Every day you delay flipping the switch. Regret compounds quietly. But once the switch is flipped, regret loses its grip. Even if progress is slow, you know you are moving. Movement heals. Now let's be clear about something. The tomorrow switch is not a guarantee of immediate results. It is a guarantee of direction. And direction beats speed. Speed without direction leads nowhere. Direction without speed still arrives. This is why people who flip the switch often look unchanged for a while. Externally, nothing dramatic happens. Internally, everything stabilizes. They stop drifting. They stop doubting. They stop restarting. They build. And one day, usually much later, people notice. They say, "You changed." But the person knows the truth. The change happened long before anyone saw it. It happened the moment tomorrow stopped being optional. This chapter ends with a simple but uncomfortable question. What will tomorrow look like if nothing changes? Because if tomorrow looks like today, the next year will look like the last year, and the next 5 years will look the same, unless you flip the switch. Not someday. Not when you feel ready. Tomorrow. One decision. One habit. One direction. Locked in. That is how lives change. Not dramatically, but permanently. If you've listened this far, something important has already happened. Not outside of you. Inside. Because this audiobook was never meant to hype you up. It was meant to settle you down. To remind you of something most people forget. Wealth and happiness are not events. They are outcomes of alignment. Alignment between who you are becoming and what you practice every day. Nothing in this message was designed to rush you. Nothing here asked you to force motivation. Nothing demanded overnight change. Because real transformation doesn't feel dramatic. It feels quiet. It feels steady. It feels inevitable. If you're waiting for a sign that this is working, this is the sign. You feel calmer about the future. You feel clearer about your direction. You feel less desperate to prove anything. That's not coincidence. That's identity stabilizing. Most people chase wealth by chasing outcomes. Most people chase happiness by chasing comfort. But those who build both understand a deeper truth. You don't chase results. You build systems. You don't wait for confidence. You create consistency. You don't look for shortcuts. You respect the process. And when you respect the process long enough, life begins to cooperate. Not loudly, not instantly, but reliably. From this point forward, there is only one real instruction. Stay in the work. Read, but with purpose. Listen, but selectively. Observe, but intelligently. Act even when it feels small. Especially when it feels small. Because small actions done daily outperform intense actions done occasionally. If there is one thing to take from this audiobook, let it be this. Tomorrow does not need to be perfect. Tomorrow only needs to be different by design. One habit, one promise kept, one system strengthened. That is enough. And if your mind wanders, if doubt creeps in, if impatience tries to rush you, come back. Re-listen while you rest. Revisit these ideas at night. Let them repeat until they feel familiar. Not because you don't understand them, but because repetition turns understanding into instinct. You don't need to tell anyone what you're building. You don't need validation. You don't need permission. Just keep showing up for the work that shapes who you're becoming. And one day, without announcement, you'll realize something changed. Not suddenly, but completely. If this audiobook resonated with you, stay connected to the channel. More long-form. Calm. Discipline-based audiobooks are coming, designed for night listening, deep focus, and long-term growth. For now, remember this. Stay in the work. The world will catch up.